a battlefield, a flood zone, or even your local airport. What stands between chaos and safety might not be a weapon, but a wall of dirt. Not just any wall, though. Meet the Hesco barrier, Britain's military secret that's quietly protecting the world. Born from coal mines and perfected in war zones, it's faster than sandbags, tougher than concrete, and smart enough for modern threats. Whether you've seen one or not, it might be saving lives near you. So what makes this box of dirt so unbeatable? Let's pull it apart and find out why sandbags may finally be history. The humble beginnings. For decades, sandbags were the quiet guardians of military bases. Whether on the front lines or guarding bridges back home, these simple sacks of sand stood as the first line of defense against bullets, bombs, and nature. They were cheap, easy to stack, and used just about everywhere, from war zones to flood zones. In many ways, sandbags were like duct tape for danger, reliable, if a little outdated. But the truth is, as wars changed, so did the weapons, and sandbags started showing their age. They were slow to build, tough on manpower, and couldn't hold up to the force of modern explosives or fast-moving threats. A single wall might take 8 people all day to finish. Worse, once it rained or time passed, they sagged or broke down. In war, that kind of weakness could be deadly. That's where a man named James "Jimmy" Heselden comes in. A former British coal miner with a sharp mind and a strong work ethic, Jimmy wasn't a soldier or scientist. But in 1989, he had a big idea. What if we could build a better barrier? Something fast, strong, and simple. That idea became a foldable steel mesh container with a fabric lining, what we now call the Hesco barrier. It started off as a tool to stop coastal erosion and flood damage. But it didn't take long for militaries, especially in the UK and US, to take notice. In places like Iraq and Afghanistan, where time and protection are everything, the Hesco barrier quickly became a game changer. As one British officer once said, Hesco barriers saved more lives than body armor ever could. From the dusty battlefields to storm-flooded towns, Hesco barriers proved they were more than just clever engineering. But what exactly makes these barriers so different from the old sandbags? What's inside those giant wire boxes that makes them so tough and so trusted? To really understand why militaries still swear by them, we need to break down their design. The anatomy of a Hesco barrier. At first glance, a Hesco barrier looks like a giant wire box. But there's more going on than meets the eye. Each unit is made up of a collapsible wire mesh frame. Think of it like a big shopping basket and lined with a heavy-duty fabric. That fabric holds the filler material in place, while the wire mesh gives the whole thing its structure and strength. The wire itself is coated in zinc aluminum, which helps it fight rust and corrosion, even in wet or sandy places. This isn't just ordinary wire fencing. It's engineered to survive explosions, gunfire, extreme temperatures, and years of wear and tear. The fabric liner is usually polypropylene, which is flame-resistant, flexible, and incredibly tough. Together, these materials make the barrier both sturdy and surprisingly lightweight when empty. What's really smart about Hesco barriers is how they connect. Units can be lined up and clipped together with steel pins, creating long walls or tight enclosures in minutes. Some come pre-attached in chains, so all you do is pull them out like an accordion, fill them with dirt or gravel, and they're ready. Stack them up, and you've got a wall. Simple, strong, and scalable. This modular design is what makes Hesco so powerful. You can build anything: walls, guard posts, blast shelters, or even bunkers. And since they're filled with whatever material is on hand, there's no need to haul in sandbags or mix concrete. "We used to spend days building defenses," said one soldier in Helmand province. "Now we do it in hours, and it actually holds." Now that we've cracked open the barrier and seen how it works, let's talk about what makes it such a game changer in real-world situations. From lightning-fast setup to full-on fortresses in the middle of nowhere, the Hesco barrier didn't just replace sandbags, it redefined the way militaries think about defense. Let's take a closer look at how they're used in the field. How Hesco took over the battlefield. In the heat of battle, every second counts. You can't afford to waste time filling thousands of sandbags when there are mortars flying overhead. That's why soldiers love Hesco barriers. 2 people with a front loader can build a 10-meter wall in just 20 minutes. That same wall with sandbags, it'd take 8 people all day, and you'd still need triple the material. From the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan to bases across Africa and Eastern Europe, Hesco barriers became standard issue. They weren't just fast, they were reliable. Whether you needed to protect a command center, a sleeping area, or an ammunition dump, Hesco made it happen. And it wasn't just about building a wall, it was about creating zones within a base to isolate damage from mortars or car bombs. Their value went beyond safety. Besides safety, they made operations smoother. By setting up strong, defined perimeters, commanders could control traffic flow, protect vehicles and aircraft, and keep troops focused on the mission. Hesco allowed them to think like engineers without needing to be one. It gave war zones structure and order. Without them, we'd be exposed. With them, we had a home base, said a U.S. Marine in Fallujah. But what's perhaps most impressive is how universal they became. NATO forces, UN peacekeepers, and even humanitarian workers use them now. They're showing up in refugee camps, border walls, and disaster response zones. When a barrier needs to go up fast and stay strong, Hesco is the go-to. Not bad for a wire box filled with dirt. It's clear that Hesco barriers changed the rules in combat, but their impact didn't stop at the front lines. These barriers started popping up in places we'd never expect, from flooded cities to riot zones and even civil infrastructure projects. Coming up next, we'll explore how a war-born invention found its second life protecting people everywhere. From war zones to flood zones. Most people think of Hesco barrier shares as tools of war, but they've saved just as many lives in times of peace. When devastating floods hit towns in the U.S. in 2017, 140 soldiers rushed to build a 6.4-kilometer-long wall using Hesco barriers. In just a few days, they stopped an entire city from being swallowed by rising waters. Why did they choose Hesco instead of sandbags? Speed. During a flood, minutes matter. Traditional sandbags are back-breaking and slow. Hesco barriers can be snapped together and filled with dirt or sand in a fraction of the time. One front loader can do the work of 10 people, and with better results. Emergency services also love the fact that Hesco barriers don't need to be dug into the ground. Their open-bottom design means they can be placed on any surface, filled on the spot, and removed when the threat passes. For disaster relief teams with limited manpower, that's a massive advantage. They're like giant Lego bricks for saving lives, said one emergency coordinator during Hurricane Harvey. The proof is everywhere, at airports, around schools, protecting highways, and even major events. Hesco barriers have become the go-to choice for civil engineers and city planners trying to defend vital infrastructure. They're strong, flexible, and surprisingly easy to use. And unlike sandbags, they can stand for years if needed, or be taken down overnight. Whether it's defending troops from mortar fire or keeping entire towns dry during floods, Hesco barriers have proven they're more than just military gear. But what makes them even more incredible is just how fast and simple they are to use. In the next section, we'll break down how these barriers go from folded metal to fortress in a matter of minutes. Setup in minutes. One of the biggest reasons Hesco barriers took over is simple. They're fast. Soldiers used to spend days building defenses with sandbags. Now, they can build a secure wall in a few hours. Just unfold the unit, hook it to the next one, and start filling it. It's like setting up furniture from IKEA, only way more important. Each unit arrives flat-packed like an accordion. This saves massive space during transport. A single truck can carry enough Hesco units to build a 1,000-foot wall. Compare that to the mountain of loose sandbags you'd need for the same job, and the teams of workers needed to fill them. Once on site, soldiers or emergency crews attach each unit using steel rods and connecting pins. Then comes the fill. Local materials like sand, earth, or gravel are dumped into the open-top containers. With a front loader or excavator, this process takes minutes per unit. For larger walls, layers can be stacked or arranged in pyramid formations for extra height and strength. And tear down? Just as easy. Remove the filler, unhook the pins, collapse the unit, and load it back up. Some even cut through the wire mesh with grinders if needed. It's not just about speed, it's about flexibility. You can build it today and take it apart tomorrow, one engineer explained. That's the real power of Hesco. Speed and simplicity are impressive, but strength is what matters when the stakes are high. When bullets are flying or floodwaters are rising, your wall needs to stand tall. So how do Hesco barriers actually hold up under pressure? Coming up next, we'll dive into the science and the battlefield tests that prove these barriers aren't just fast, they're nearly indestructible. Tested under fire. It's one thing to build a barrier fast. It's another for that barrier to take a hit and stay standing. That's where Hesco barriers really shine. These things are built like tanks. Their wire mesh frame and thick liners absorb shock from explosions, bullets, and even vehicle impacts. When tested in the field, they stopped everything from AK-47 rounds to mortar shells. The material matters. The steel mesh is coated to resist rust and corrosion, even in brutal climates. Whether it's the desert sun, monsoon rain, or freezing Arctic winds, Hesco holds. The polypropylene liner, it doesn't rip, it doesn't melt, and it shrugs off flames. Together, they form a barrier that outperforms traditional sandbags in every way. In fact, during NATO tests, Hesco barriers absorb multiple explosive blasts without collapsing. Where sandbags tore open or toppled, Hesco stayed firm. The structure compresses slightly, soaking up impact energy, kind of like a car's crumple zone. That's why so many forward operating bases use them not just outside the walls, but inside too, creating blast zones in safe areas. And if that wasn't enough, they can even stop vehicles. In 2006, a suicide truck bomb hit a forward base in Afghanistan. The vehicle was packed with explosives, but the Hesco barrier perimeter absorbed the blast. Buildings were damaged, but the troops inside survived. One soldier said afterward, "Without those barriers, we'd all be dead, no question." So now we know they're tough, fast, and used almost everywhere. But how do these massive structures actually fit into modern base design? It turns out, the Hesco barrier isn't just a wall, it's a building block for entire fortresses. In the next section, we'll explore how militaries around the world use these barriers to design safer, smarter camps from the ground up. Building a fortress military bases used to take weeks, even months, to build up securely. With Hesco barriers, that timeline has been cut drastically. These barriers aren't just for the outer walls, they're used for internal layout too, like creating zones that keep explosions and attacks from reaching command centers, ammo depots, or barracks. Soldiers can use Hesco units to create layered defenses. First, an outer wall shields the entire base. Then smaller units are added within. Think of them like blast shock absorbers. If a mortar hits one section, the impact is absorbed before it can spread. During the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, this method became a standard. Some bases even had Hesco-lined hallways to protect soldiers moving between buildings. What's impressive is how modular the setup is. Hesco walls can be stacked, bent, or angled to match the terrain. A base on a mountain ridge or in a valley? No problem. Builders simply follow the landscape. It's like building with massive Lego blocks, one engineer said. Except these Lego blocks can save your life. Beyond combat zones, NATO forces and peacekeepers use the same approach. Camps in disaster zones, refugee shelters, and emergency response hubs have all been built with Hesco infrastructure. Some structures even integrate roofs to make temporary housing, strong enough to withstand harsh weather and even bomb blasts. When soldiers say these barriers give them peace of mind, they're not exaggerating. Military engineers aren't the only ones praising the design. Everyday construction crews, emergency responders, and even architects are realizing just how flexible these barriers are. But with all their benefits, how do Hesco barriers compare cost-wise and logistically to old-school sandbags? Up next, we'll weigh the real-world costs, money, labor, and lives, between the two. Hesco versus sandbags. Let's talk numbers. One Hesco barrier may cost more upfront than a sandbag, but once you factor in labor, time, and logistics, Hesco wins by a mile. To build a 10-meter wall, it takes 2 people and a front loader about 20 minutes using Hesco. The same job with sandbags, 8 people, 8 hours, and 3 times the material. Think about that. Sandbags aren't just bags. They're an entire system. You need to fill them, stack them carefully, and constantly maintain them. They can tear, collapse, and soak up water, making them even heavier. And let's not forget, sandbags usually end up in landfills after use. Hesco barriers, on the other hand, can be emptied, folded, and reused. There's also the issue of manpower. In war zones or disaster relief efforts, every person counts. You can't afford to have half your team shoveling sand. With Hesco, fewer people can secure an area much faster. In emergencies, saving hours can mean saving lives, said a logistics officer with the British Army. That's where Hesco really shines. And finally, there's the protection value. $1 spent on Hesco gives you far more safety than that same dollar on sandbags. They last longer, defend better, and adapt to more situations. Whether you're stopping a flood or shielding against RPGs, Hesco is the smarter investment. And that's why they're used worldwide. Now that we've seen how Hesco barriers outperform sandbags in nearly every way, you might be wondering, what kind of innovations are coming next? After all, even the best technology needs upgrades. Coming up next, we'll take a look at the future of battlefield protection and how the UK is pushing Hesco technology even further. Evolving tech. The original Hesco design hasn't changed much since 1989, but behind the scenes, engineers are working on smarter, lighter, and more durable versions. One key focus? Reducing transport weight. Even though Hescos are collapsible, the steel mesh adds bulk. New prototypes are testing advanced alloys that are just as strong, but lighter to carry. Another breakthrough involves automated deployment. Imagine a container full of pre-connected Hesco units that unfolds like an accordion at the push of a button. In emergencies, this would allow soldiers or responders to deploy hundreds of feet of wall in just minutes. No shovels, no sweat. Field tests on these systems have already begun in the UK. There's also talk of integrating smart sensors into the barriers. These sensors could detect impacts, measure pressure, and even alert troops if a section is damaged or breached. Think of it as a high-tech wall that talks to you. We want barriers that do more than just sit there, said one defense tech developer. We want barriers that think. And finally, environmental sustainability is part of the plan. While Hesco barriers already use local earth or sand for fill, some versions are being tested with recycled or biodegradable materials. Others are being reinforced to last for years in civilian settings, turning flood walls and border barriers into semi-permanent infrastructure. From flood protection to battlefield safety, and now into the world of smart defense, Hesco barriers are evolving fast. But no matter how modern they become, one thing remains the same: their power to protect. In the next part of our journey, we'll zoom out and see just how global this innovation has become, and why nations far beyond the UK rely on it. Hesco around the world. It's not just the UK using Hesco barriers. Over the years, more than 80 countries have deployed them in everything from military operations to disaster zones. In Afghanistan, NATO used Hesco to protect remote outposts from rocket attacks. In the US, FEMA deployed them to hold back floodwaters during hurricanes like Katrina and Harvey. In Iraq, entire forward operating bases were built in a matter of days thanks to Hesco. The barriers weren't just outer defenses, they were used to create blast-proof walkways, protect command centers, and even make bunkered sleeping quarters. One US general famously said, "Without Hesco, we'd be sleeping in holes." But it's not just about war. In Africa, Hesco is used to secure UN refugee camps. In flood-prone regions of Asia, they've become the go-to tool for last-minute protection. Their ability to use local fill means they don't need sand shipped in. Just open the frame, scoop in the dirt, and you're protected. Even major airports have started using them. In 2022, London's Heathrow Airport added a Hesco-based perimeter as part of a temporary threat management system. Their speed, flexibility, and security make them the preferred solution in fast-moving crises. That kind of reputation doesn't happen overnight. It's built on decades of reliability. So we've seen how Hesco is helping everywhere, from flooded towns to high-security zones. But what about when things go wrong? What happens when barriers fail or aren't used properly? In our next section, we look at the real risks of misuse and how human error can turn even the best defense into a ticking time bomb. When Hesco fails, even the best tool can fail if used incorrectly. In 2010, a military base in Helmand Province, Afghanistan, suffered a devastating attack. Insurgents launched mortars that hit a section of the wall where Hesco barriers hadn't been fully filled. The barriers crumpled like paper, exposing the inner camp. The result? Lives lost, all because of a rushed job. It turns out Hesco is only as good as its setup. If it's not filled to the top and properly compacted, it won't work as intended. Some builders skip steps to save time, but that's a dangerous gamble. As one veteran put it, you can't half-fill a Hesco wall and expect full protection. Another risk is poor placement. In 2017, heavy rains in Bangladesh overwhelmed a Hesco barrier because it had been set up on unstable ground. It slid, tilted, and finally collapsed. Engineers later said that proper leveling and anchoring could have prevented the whole thing. Lessons like these are hard-won and crucial to share. Maintenance matters too. In the UK, an old coastal Hesco barrier meant to control erosion started leaking after years of neglect. The metal mesh had rusted through. They're strong, one engineer noted, but not immortal. Regular inspections, updates, and training are part of the package if you want Hesco to do its job long-term. Despite these failures, Hesco barriers have earned their reputation through consistency and innovation. In fact, the man behind the modern Hesco design left a lasting mark on both battlefield safety and everyday disaster relief. In our next section, we take a closer look at the life and strange final moments of inventor James "Jimmy" Heselden, the man behind the barrier. Born in a working-class neighborhood in Leeds, England, Jimmy Heselden started as a coal miner before becoming a millionaire inventor. He knew what it meant to face danger every day. That background shaped the invention of the modern Hesco barrier, something tough, simple, and life-saving. He wasn't a soldier, but his invention has saved thousands. In 1989, he developed the collapsible wire mesh and fabric-lined container we now know as the Hesco barrier. Originally for erosion control, it found its true purpose on the battlefield. He later said, "I wanted something practical, no frills, just something that worked." And it did. Hesco became one of the most used defense tools in modern military history. Heselden didn't stop at invention. He donated millions to charity, funded local schools, and set up programs for unemployed youth. He never forgot where he came from. By 2010, he'd become one of the UK's richest self-made men. Ironically, his life ended in an accident that involved another invention, Segway. In a bizarre twist, Heselden, who had recently bought the Segway company, died after riding one off a 13-meter cliff near his home. It shocked the nation. But even after his passing, his work lived on. As one military commander said, "The man may be gone, but what he built still stands between us and harm." From a coal miner to an innovator, Jimmy Heselden's story proves that sometimes the most important ideas come from the most unlikely places. But what about the future? In our final chapter, we'll explore where Hesco barriers are headed next, and how they might become even more essential in a world facing growing threats. The future of protection. As threats evolve, be it at climate change, urban warfare, or cyber sabotage, the need for rapid, resilient protection is growing. Hesco's next chapter might not just be steel and fabric. Developers are experimenting with self-deploying walls, smart sensors, and materials that adapt to impact. Think barriers that can repair themselves, one defense tech insider hinted. One idea gaining traction is drone-assisted deployment. In disaster zones or active war zones, drones could deliver and drop Hesco units, which auto-expand upon landing. That may sound like science fiction, but several militaries are already funding prototype tests. Speed and automation are the future, especially when lives are on the line. In climate-prone cities, planners are pushing to integrate Hesco into permanent flood defenses. These would be retractable or partially buried, activated during emergencies. They've even been proposed as solutions to stop wildfires when filled with special fire-retardant materials. Once a battlefield tool, Hesco may soon be part of everyday life. But no matter how advanced the tech becomes, the core goal remains the same. Protect people, fast. Whether it's a soldier in a war zone or a family in a floodplain, Hesco barriers offer one thing: time. Time to respond, time to survive. And in many situations, that's the difference between life and death. The next time you see a dusty wire box filled with dirt at a construction site or behind a military checkpoint, remember, it's more than just a box. It's the product of a coal miner's mind, a soldier's shield, and maybe, just maybe, a piece of the future. Would you like this full script formatted for video production with VO tags, scene descriptions, or visual prompts? So, is this the end of the sandbag era? Maybe not just yet, but there's no denying that Hesco barriers have changed the game. From battlefields to flood zones, from refugee camps to future cities, they've become the go-to shield when speed, strength, and simplicity matter most. And as new threats rise, these wire-framed walls might be the front line of tomorrow's defenses. One man's invention, built from the grit of his mining days, is now a global safeguard. What's next for Hesco? Only time will tell. But for now, they're not just holding back dirt, they're holding back disaster.